Good day. Welcome to the Corey Morgan Show. You might notice something a little different in the background, not our usual backdrop of the city of Calgary. We're actually coming live from the floor of the Global Energy Show here in Calgary in the new BMO Center. This is a first for us. We haven't done this show from a live location before, and it's going great so far. Man, this setup is something else. There's 500 exhibitors here. The new BMO Center is massive. This is the first event it's held. Kind of, brings about some of those discussions. I mean, whether subsidized infrastructure is worth it or if it's not worth it, because when you have a center like this, of course, you can draw big events, you can draw international money, draw discourse even. If you don't have that set up in the first place, you miss out. But again, typically, though, when government gets involved in subsidized things, they can go bad as well. Either way, I got a good show coming up today. I've got Franco Terrazzano who's going to talk in a little while. Lots to cover. We've got the capital gains tax is now official. Part of what I wanted to talk about too, though, was that the Parliamentary Budgetary Office is not allowed to report on what the impacts of the carbon tax are. And I'm really interested in talking to Franco about that because, I mean, they're hiding their own information from us, or if hiding our information from us. That's the reality of what's going on with that. So Franco's going to lay out a little more of that, and we'll check in with Dave and do a few more things. So let's talk about what I want to get on about today too, though. So for people in the Calgary area, that on the morning of June 6th, all of us probably remember, nothing huge and tragic, but an emergency alert came out. You know, that emergency sound comes on your phones, it's on the radio, it's on TV. Everybody, we're talking millions of people in Calgary and area. We're told that water supply levels had hit a critical level and people shouldn't wash dishes or even shower or try to even put off flushing the toilet for fear of running out of water. Yeah, that's what they were warning us in the emergency alert, because there was a water main break in North Calgary, and apparently it was so bad that even outlying towns from the city were placed under emergency water restrictions. Now, questions were quickly asked, of course. I mean, how is it that over 1.5 million people are dependent upon a single line for their water supply? What caused the break? How long is it going to be before people could use their water normally again, which they still aren't by now? The city of Calgary didn't have too many details to offer. And then everyone to try and expand upon her already massive personal unpopularity among Calgarians, Mayor Jyoti Gondek came on out and held a press conference that offered few details on what happened, but she took the opportunity to try and blame the mess on Premier Smith. Gondek, of course, was slammed by the local media and other people and citizens on the weekend because it was just beyond the pale. But on the weekend, she did something really rare for Gondek. She offered a rare apology for her terrible communications at a time of crisis. Gondek's not much one for apologizing. It really wasn't a time when Calgarians wanted to hear the mayor trying to take cheap shots at the provincial government. It doesn't help that whenever Gondek does anything, it looks like she's got a mouthful of poop. She really despises talking to you guys, and it shows. So either way, whose fault is the water crisis? Well, Mayor Gondek isn't directly or personally responsible, but this mess lands fully in the lap of Calgary's City Hall. I mean, it isn't Trudeau's fault. Lots of things are. It isn't Smith's fault. Responsibility lands with the city. And Gondek, for better or worse, usually worse, is at the helm right now. The city of Calgary, I mean, they've had surpluses over $200 million a year. Yeah, they've been overtaxing everybody by that much. They have a contingency fund of over $4 billion. So how is it that a city awash in so much money can't fill the bloody potholes in the streets or maintain a reliable source of water? Well, it's because Calgary, like most other cities, has allowed their politicians and administration to drift way out of their designated lanes. Cities are wasting time and resources on countless projects that aren't within their jurisdiction while they ignore the obligations that land within municipal jurisdiction. I mean, Calgary's wasted time and money on everything from failed Olympic bids, subsidizing ridiculous business startups. Remember Rocket Space? Spending $4.8 million for a 3-word slogan. Hideous public art installations, woke social engineering initiatives, banning paper bags. That was a brilliant one, wasn't it? And of course, Gondek's $87 billion climate change plan. None of these things should be in the domain of a municipal government. Municipal politicians, though, they're driven by vanity, and every one of them wants to lay claim to a legacy for their time in office. Bridges, roads, water pipes, those are boring. They want to cut the ribbons for exciting new expenditures, whether the city needs them or not. Unfortunately, of course, it means they're ignoring the important stuff. And Calgary's far from alone. It's happening in cities and towns across the province and likely across the country. That's what inspired Premier Danielle Smith and her government to create legislation giving the provincial government more powers to intervene when a municipal government goes off the rails. The province always had those powers, but now they're more clarified. Now, the overreach of municipal governments shouldn't be brought in to check for expanding the reach of another level of government, however. I don't like that. The only way to correct actually the bloated, large, inefficient civil governments is for citizens to get off their asses at election time and start firing their mayors and councils. Part of what created the apathy and cynicism among the electorate has been what they fire one mayor or councillor who misrepresented themselves on the way into the office. They end up electing another one who misrepresents themselves on the way in. Well, with the political party system coming into place, it's going to be harder for faux conservatives and faux common sense people to slip by the electorate as they used to be, because they're going to have to go through a nomination. Nobody in Calgary campaigned on a massive climate change plan, paper bag bans, and spending millions on three-word slogans. Yet that's what the city got when this latest crop of councillors came in with Mayor Gondek. The mandate for municipalities is pretty basic. They exist to provide road and water infrastructure, some policing, fire services, taking care of the trash, and a small degree of municipal bylaws and zoning to ensure neighbors get along. So far, the city of Calgary is doing a terrible job on all those top priorities, even though they're constantly increasing taxes. The mayor and council, they're constantly distracted with personal vanity projects and virtue signaling while they ignore the basic needs of the city. Meanwhile, the civil service continues to bloat while delivering worse services every year. Sometimes solutions can be simple. Calgary and other municipalities have to replace their mayors and councillors with common sense candidates, and they get the chance in a little more than a year. The contenders need to campaign on going back to the basics. Unlike their predecessors, though, they have to mean it. Citizens have the power to reduce the taxes and reduce the overreach and improve their basic services, but they need to exercise it and effectively. So yeah, with political parties holding candidates to account before they even reach a ballot, I'm tentatively optimistic that municipalities in Alberta are about to experience a mass change, and hopefully for the better. Either way, everybody, you got to put off washing your privates for at least another week in Calgary, I guess, because they still haven't figured out exactly how long it's going to take to get the water back to normal. And we really need some answers. I mean, the legacy media is busy with their lips locked on Gondek's tired butt and saying, oh, look, she's learned now. She's been communicating excellently. Sure, she has, but she hasn't been saying a bloody thing. We still haven't found out why this happened, how this happened. I mean, again, accidents happen, but we're talking a city of 1.5 million people. This is not a minor oversight or minor problem. Either way, I'll stay on her case, and we'll see if we can't make it better. Let's get on to our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what else is going out there in the big bad world. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's going well, Corey. I'm quite excited after all these years to finally do a remote broadcast.
Yeah, well, and then we're doing one from the floor here, and you've got a nice, quiet newsroom to deal with today.
Oh, it's just me and Nigel. It's great. Oh, right. And Jen's hidden around the corner. But I understand, Corey, that this brand new, sparkly new BMO Center, $500 million, but they forgot one little thing, right?
They certainly did. And yeah, with my morning coffee load, it became almost like the water crisis.
So expand. There's no washrooms, right?
We'll expand. There are no washrooms. 350,000 square feet is the size of the exhibition area. And it's beautiful, you know, great lighting, tall ceilings, everything's new. And I'm walking in circles wondering where the washroom is. You have to leave the exhibition area, go into the concourse, do whatever you have to do, and then bring out your ID and wait in line and get back into the exhibition area. I mean, for $500 million, I would have thought they would have considered putting a place where somebody could pinch a loaf.
Yeah, I guess. Nobody can think of everything, right, Corey?
I guess not.
Yeah, we got some good stuff on the website this morning. We're leading off with an interesting story. You remember last week, I believe it was, or early this week, excuse me. Former Premier Alison Redford was appointed to the board of Invest Alberta. Daniel Smith today said she got the appointment because Alison Smith couldn't find a job. Alison Redford, couldn't find a job in Alberta, interestingly enough. And you'll remember her scandal-ridden premiership, what with the Sky Palace and all the government flights she took her daughter on. Seems to have Albertans have not forgotten, and she's apparently having trouble finding work in the province that she was premier in. The wacky story of the day, so something you never thought you'd write a headline for. We've got a biological male who wants to have a uterus implanted just so she could have an abortion. So she could be the first biological male to have an abortion. Why she's not locked up in the loony bin is beyond me. Intrepid Oilers reporter up in Edmonton, Jonathan Bradley, has his latest notebook out there. You remember last week the anti-Israeli graduate at McGill walked across to get her diploma and spit at all the deans because of her anger over Israel. Now a petition started to try and get her charged with assault, which spitting certainly is, and have her booted from McGill. Speaking of education, our columnist Lusek has got a piece on what he thinks of the education system and what kind of products it's spitting out at the end. Our Linda Slobodian, while battling an abscessed tooth, has come out after the guilty verdict on Hunter Biden, and she says we should not be having any sympathy for this crackhead whatsoever. And one other thing I'll mention is the Kenney-era War Room, $30 million. You remember that? Launched a couple of years ago to battle false narratives in the energy industry, and started with a bit of a flop because their logo was copyrighted to somebody else. But that's now being disbanded, and most of the staff laid off, and the War Room itself is being absorbed into a regular Government of Alberta department. So there you go, Corey. That's what's happening up here in the lonely newsroom while you guys are down there having all the fun.
Well, great. I feel for poor Linda. That sounds very uncomfortable. I know she's the second crabbiest columnist at the Standard, so I hope she recovers soon so she can write with a clear mind and less pain.
There you go. Emergency surgery, hopefully tomorrow.
Ooh, okay. Well, thanks, Dave. And, I'll see you in the newsroom next week, I guess.
Yeah, have fun on the pipeline tonight.
Right on. All right. So that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. As you see, there's still a few people running around the newsroom. We got a whole bunch of them running around here down on the convention floor. And, this is where I kind of remind you, though, the reason we're doing this live hit, the reason we've got all those news stories, that unique content. We are the biggest newsroom in Western Canada these days, I guess, is because you guys are subscribed. We don't take government dollars. We rely on you. It's $9.99 a month, guys, $100 a year. Get past that paywall, help support us, help support our producers, help support our reporters so we can keep getting that content out to you guys. So if you haven't subscribed yet, get on there, westernstandard.news/subscription. If you already have, thank you very much. We really, really do appreciate it. Between that and private sponsorship, that's how we keep rolling. I see Jordan asking if the pipeline's going to be at the convention too. It will indeed. So you'll watch it this evening, but it will be from the convention floor, as you can see, a really busy spot. So it's pretty interesting. Hey, Alison Redford, what a headline. Apparently, it was a mercy hire on the part of Premier Smith because Redford couldn't find a job here in Alberta. And hey, Danielle Smith, the Premier, she's here at this global event here in Calgary. She was speaking yesterday. She's going to be speaking today. I believe we might be streaming some of her press conference later today. I love a lot of what Premier Smith does, but I'm not sure about this one. And it's not just spite for Premier Redford, though I kind of admit, the Queen of the Sky Palace, I don't have a lot of use for her as a public figure, but she made her money already. Do we really need to give her a token position in the province? Come on. I mean, I had to bring my own sandwich here today. If you really want, you could buy a bigger advertising contract with the Standard. Maybe Derek will buy me a lunch for one of these broadcasts. But giving Alison Redford a job, that's something I never expected or thought I was going to see coming from the Smith government. I guess trying to build a broad coalition, that's one way to do it. I'm just not sure if it's the right broad to do it with. But that's where we're sitting on that one. Okay, so let's get on to our guest. Looking forward to that. Lots of questions. 15 minutes won't be enough. There's so much going on. But we got Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Hey, Franco, how's it going?
Hey, Corey. Great to be with you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. As I said, there's a lot going on. I know you guys are running off in all directions. The one I first, when I contacted you to come on, though, I want to start with that at least. So the Parliamentary Budget Office came up with a report on what the carbon tax is costing people, but apparently they're not allowed to release it now.
Well, so what happened is that, and this was confirmed in the Finance Committee, is that the government, I believe it was the Department of Environment, gave the PBO its own economic analysis of the carbon tax, and the PBO used the government's own analysis to inform its own report. But now what is breaking news in the Finance Committee is that apparently the government has put some sort of gag order on the PBO, saying that the PBO cannot release the Department of Environment's own analysis on the economic cost of the carbon tax. So, I mean, par for the course with the lack of transparency, unfortunately, coming from this government. I think I'll just state the obvious. Taxpayers paid for that analysis to be done within the Department of Environment. We sure have the right to see what those economic costs are.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't supposed to be an internal study, but I guess they just didn't like the outcome. So if they don't like the outcome, they say, well, we'd just rather not let people know. I mean, how much longer can they keep the lid on this bottle? Canadians realized, I mean, the Prime Minister got booed by mayors in Canada when he tried to make that claim that, you know, most people are benefiting from the carbon tax. They're really willing to die on this hill, aren't they?
Well, nobody believes them. That's the bright spot here, is that Canadians don't believe what the Trudeau government is trying to spin us on the carbon tax. I mean, Corey, come on, man. Like, if you actually think the government can impose a tax, then charge its sales tax on top of the tax, then skim hundreds of millions of dollars off the top to pay for bureaucrats to administer the tax, and somehow make you better off with rebates, then I've got some Ocean View property to sell you, Corey, in Lethbridge.
Yeah, well, I think we're kind of already buying it, but we're doing it through our taxes and we don't get to enjoy it. So moving on beyond that, though, I mean, there was the capital gains tax that's been formally entrenched by Parliament yesterday, was it?
Well, so what happened is essentially that Parliament voted on the motion. To their credit, Mr. Poilievre and the Conservative Party, they voted against Trudeau's capital gains tax hike. So they decided to stick up for taxpayers and fight the capital gains tax increase. That is the good news. The bad news is that the motion passed because the Liberals, the NDP, and the Bloc supported the capital gains tax hike. Now, folks, this is such a disastrous tax. It's going to impact a lot of Canadians. You've already heard the doctors warning about this, how they're going to be impacted. You have many small businesses that are going to be impacted by this. People preparing for the retirement are going to be impacted by this. And also, too, like, this capital gains tax hike, it's going to discourage that young, smart tech entrepreneur who just graduated from a computer science degree. It's going to discourage that young individual from setting up shop in Canada, maybe producing the next Amazon here in Canada. And instead, this capital gains tax hike is going to push entrepreneurs like that to leave Canada and to take their investment dollars and jobs with them.
Well, that's it. There's some of the real misinformation coming out of, I would say, you know, Chrystia Freeland the other day speaking, and the messaging they're putting out, which I still don't care for with those, the class warfare and the politics of envy. But hey, we're just taking a little more from the ultra rich. But the reality is we have over, I think 300,000 incorporated businesses, most of them small and medium sized. They're getting hit by this, every one of them. And that's going to cost us in the end. It always does.
Well, and Corey, it only takes you 2 seconds to really think about the government's spin to see right through it. I mean, first of all, if the government wants the rich to pay more, how about the government just makes rich multinational corporations pay for their own factories? You know what I mean? Like, how about you stop giving billions of dollars to these multinational corporations like Honda, Volkswagen, Stellantis, and Northvolt to build these EV battery factories, right? Just end the corporate welfare. But the second type of spin I see coming from the finance minister and Trudeau, which kind of makes me laugh, is this whole notion that they had to bring in this tax to help the next generation. Excuse me, like, this government has officially doubled the entire national debt. Who's going to be paying for that? Canadians' kids and grandkids are going to be making payments on the Trudeau government's debt for the rest of their lives, right? So that doesn't add up. Here's another thing that doesn't add up. This isn't about balancing the budget or being fiscally responsible. This government has proven that it couldn't care less about balancing the budget. Corey, even after this massive capital gains tax hike, the government is still running a $40 billion deficit this year. And you know what? With Trudeau spending $535 billion in 2024, he's going to blow through this extra capital gains tax revenue in like 5 days.
Yeah, well, and it's basically caused a run as well. I mean, people with capital, gains potentially, they've been encouraged now to do a massive sell-off, and that's part of the shell game that's going on. Though a lot of people are saying, "Well, I'm getting out right now before that ceiling rises," and it's going to show a short-term influx of a bunch of money coming into the government. But in reality, in the long run, again, it's going to be terribly costly.
And let's not pretend that this extra tax revenue is a good thing. It's not. The government doesn't deserve a single penny more from any Canadian, whether it's taking it directly from your pocket or directly from someone else's. All it's going to do is encourage this government to blow even more of our money, right? We don't need to give the government, a single penny more. But even more to the point, even if your listeners are saying, well, I'm not going to be impacted directly. Well, here's why you should care about this. If Canadians do not push back, if we let Trudeau and Freeland off the hook on this capital gains tax increase, you can be sure that they will continue to look for more ways to take more money from you. Okay, the next scheduled election is October. It's October 2025. Well, they're going to have another budget before then, right? It's a good bet that if they get away with this capital gains tax hike without blowback from Canadians, that there'll be more taxes on more Canadians just around the corner.
Well, and getting back to, I guess, the bottom line is they don't need more money. They got to get spending under control. And the next question is always where to cut it. And you said that off the bat with corporate welfare. I mean, it's a massive expenditure for Canadians. It never brings the return to us they promise it will. We give a little credit to the Conservative Party for at least coming out and saying they're opposed to the capital gains tax increase. But unfortunately, when it comes to corporate welfare, almost every party tends to get guilty of that when they get in office. Have we heard from the opposition saying they would consider rolling back any of the corporate welfare, or at least not giving out as much if and when they form government?
Well, I interviewed Mr. Poilievre for a interview piece in our magazine, The Taxpayer. And, with a couple of the interviews that we did, he did say that he would cut corporate welfare and use that to reduce taxes, I believe, for small businesses. You can check out some of the interviews on the Canadian Taxpayers Federation on YouTube to hear for yourself. But Mr. Poilievre is on the record saying he would cut corporate welfare, which is good. I mean, a little bit vague. We think that they should completely scrap corporate welfare. One, it's bad. Right? First of all, they don't have the economic incentives. It's not their money. If these politicians and bureaucrats knew which business was going to be successful, they wouldn't be politicians or bureaucrats, right? They'd be using their own money in the market. But the second thing, too, here is you got to remember these are all about political incentives, right? They have the political incentives. They don't have the economic incentives. And number three is that corporate welfare, at best, is a shell game. You're not really creating any jobs. At best, you're just taking money from taxpayers in other parts of the economy and giving it to select corporations that have armies of lobbyists.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad, but it's coming to the point where effective lobbying is more important than actually effective business practices. Another area, though, where there's certainly a lot of room, I think, to cut, and nobody really wants to say those words out loud, though, is that civil service. I mean, it's been massively expanded since the Trudeau government got into power, and is costing a lot of money, and they're putting their heels in because they might have to show up for work 3 days a week in the office. Again, do you think, though, that's always a touchy area? Do you think the government would have the courage to start shaving that back if they got in? Because, of course, the union terrifies most politicians of every stripe.
It's going to come to the point where the government will have no choice, right? Kind of like what happened in the 90s, right? Under Ralph Klein to tackle the deficit. He brought in the union bosses and he's like, hey, look, either you take a 5% pay cut or we lay off 5% of people, right? It's your decision. You go back to your members and you tell them what you want to do. But it's going to come to that kind of point here. And the reason I say that is because already, right now, more than half of the government's day-to-day spending is consumed by the bureaucracy. So if you want to tackle a $40 billion deficit, a $1.2 trillion debt, you got to tackle the big side of the arithmetic here, right? And let's not forget that the federal government has increased the number of bureaucrats by 100,000 people since Trudeau has taken office. The government has handed out $1.5 billion plus in bonuses since 2015. Corey, just over the last 4 years, Trudeau has rubber stamped more than 1 million pay raises. Okay, so we've paid for hundreds of millions in bonuses, hundreds of thousands of pay raises, tens of thousands of extra bureaucrats, and we're still getting bad services from the feds.
Well, and that's another point that's difficult because we tend to rely on anecdotes. But I mean, pretty much anybody who's dealt with a government service knows you're not dealing with efficient workers and efficient office. It's very difficult to get anything done. They seem to be overstaffed. Try to renew a passport these days, or look at the lineup outside of a Service Canada station. You know, people are waiting literally early in the morning to get in to see somebody face to face. But how can you measure? That's one of the hard parts. How do you measure productivity with a bureaucrat? I mean, they can kind of obfuscate the whole mess.
Well, I mean, that's one of the issues with government, right? It's the fact that there isn't the inherent accountability of profit and loss like there is in the marketplace, right? In the marketplace, in free enterprise, if you don't consider the bad form of capitalism, which is just corporate welfare, but if you look at the free market, a business is successful when it makes profit. Businesses are punished when they make losses, right? And the free market tends to weed the bad businesses out relatively quickly and encourage the good entrepreneurs to come into the market. But in government, there isn't this mechanism of profit and loss. So some things that the government tries to do to get around this is that they have department performance targets. Well, folks, as you could probably guess, the government barely can meet half of its own performance targets every single year. Most years they don't even meet half of their own performance targets. Yet 90% of government executives get a bonus every single year for an average bonus of $18,000. Now, Corey, what's so crazy about that is that, you know, if you went to Derek and you said, "Hey, boss, I didn't even meet half of my own performance targets," Derek wouldn't be giving you an $18,000 bonus check, buddy. He'd be showing you the door.
Oh, absolutely. If nothing else, Derek is quite frugal, as he should be. Hey, small business is difficult. You got to, and that's the difference. You know, you've got to keep those costs in line, but that just doesn't apply with government. With the last few minutes before I let you go, then, I mean, we're into a period, you know, the election is sort of looming. This is the time, though, when governments or parties of all stripes are a little more receptive to common sense or making promises. What would you like to see coming into this? Where should this government be pressed besides the carbon tax, I guess, which is sort of obvious on one front? What else would you like to see?
Well, I mean, let me be quick on here and let me take another angle. So first of all, cut taxes, cut wasteful spending, balance the budget. Okay, that's what we want the government to see. But I actually have a bit of an ask and an urgent, update for your supporters. And that's like, hey, folks, if you're watching the Western Standard and if you're upset with what's going on, to Corey's point, right now is the perfect time to take action and to reach out to these parties, reach out to these members of parliament and tell them what you want to see. Now is the perfect time to do it. Don't wait until a new politician may get elected, a new party may get elected. That's too late. You have to get engaged now and push these parties, push these members of parliament, push these political hopefuls to do the right thing. That has to start right now.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And that's certainly what you guys have been doing with the Taxpayers Federation effectively for years. I really do appreciate the work you guys do. You dive into a lot of dry data and put it out into a digestible thing for people they're just busy paying the bills and working. They need that point form thing to understand it. And I like that advice because, again, the day after the election is the time when the politicians are the least receptive to you. So Yep. You've got a window of opportunity coming up ahead. So where I see you got the Taxpayer magazine and where else can people find out what you guys are up to and what you're doing out there?
Taxpayer.com, folks. Check out the newsroom, sign some petitions. You can pretty much follow us on every social media. Just type in Canadian Taxpayers Federation. If you want to follow me on social media, it's just at Franco_nomics. But again, the best place to find all of our resources is at taxpayer.com.
Right on. Well, thanks, Franco. It's always great having you on, and I appreciate as I said, the work you guys do. So I'll let you get back at it, and I hope we'll have you on again sometime soon.
Thanks, Corey. Take care, everyone.
Right on. Thanks. So yes, Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Like I said, these groups, these organizations are important. I mean, your average citizen, as I said, are tired. We're busy. We're just trying to make the car payment or the mortgage payment or the rent or whatever we got. We still have to pay attention. And they make it easy. They've got petitions. They've got the articles, the things, so you can find out quickly what's going on. And as you said, right now, the politicians are listening, or at least as close to listening as you're going to get them. And now's the time to twist their arm a bit and say, hey, I'd like to see something different going on in the next election. Get those promises down. They don't always follow through with them, but you got to keep trying, guys. The game never stops. You might not be guaranteed to win if you take part, but you're guaranteed to lose if you don't. So, okay, enough of my nagging for you to get off your legs. Let's talk about some of the horrific things going on. This has still got me flabbergasted. We have a report from a parliamentary committee, a committee formed by the Liberal government that has said we have witting actors. We have parliamentarians. That could be members of parliament. That could be senators, actually. But they're actually witting participants in foreign interference. They're beholden to foreign governments that do not have Canada's interest in mind. We know it. It's been clarified. We've known this for a long time. Sam Cooper has been doing fantastic work in exposing this for years. And it just keeps coming out, and the Trudeau government just keeps kicking the can down the road. He got his little Uncle Johnston to come out and try and cover it up. That failed. And then he had this baloney inquiry where they just spent time spinning their wheels. That's not going to conclude anything. But even with the Liberal government forming this committee, and that committee couldn't avoid this, and we've gotten, people are speculating, up to 10, maybe 11 that are compromised. And the government refuses to do anything about it. They refuse. We've got spies in Parliament. That's how serious this is. A security expert, I believe his name is Wark, it could be Wesley Wark, I'm not sure. He was blunt about reading this thing. It was nauseating, he said, and textbook treason. We have a government covering up for treason. But are you seeing it really on the top of the headlines right now? No. Why not? Because legacy media has their lips locked on the starfish of Prime Minister Trudeau because they're all going broke. Look at Chorus Entertainment these days. I've been watching their stock with morbid curiosity. They're down to 28 cents a share. That's over 95% down. That's all global media, a bunch of channels, a bunch of radio stations. So what are they doing? They're begging for bailouts. They're sniveling to the federal government. Please, please, we're too big to fail. We're too important. Give us money, give us money. Well, what happens when you give them money? Well, again, they're scared to tick off the government. So when we've got a story that should be one of the biggest stories of a generation, up to 10, 11 spies in our parliament, it's not making headline news. It's not the front of the line. In fact, they have been quoting that crackpot Elizabeth May, who went and got the security clearance and read the report, and somehow good old crazy Liz managed to conclude, say, nah, there's not a problem here. In fact, there's no names. What? Even the Bloc Québécois said there's names in there. You see, they've seen it. This is part of the game. This is part of the shell game that's going on. A number of our people in Parliament have seen it. And that's where people keep trying to play gotcha with Per Poilievre, saying, why won't he get his security clearance? What's he hiding that he won't go in? The thing is, when you want to look at that report in full, if you want to see the non-redacted copy, where it's all hidden. I mean, we've got the copy which basically said, yes, we're lousy with spies from other nations, probably India, probably China, but we won't tell you any of the names. The names are in there, but they've all been redacted. Those members can see it, but they basically sign, they lose parliamentary privilege. They are not allowed to disclose what they've seen in the redacted sections once they do that. If Poilievre signs that, he will not be allowed to speak later about what's in it. It's an ironic trap set for him there. So Lizzie May went and read it and said there's no problem. And the Liberals are actually trumpeting, see, there's nothing to be seen there. There's not a problem. If that's the case, why are you hiding it? If that's the case, why are you afraid of the names coming out? Liz said there are no names. Then don't worry about it. Take the redacted issue away. Even Trudeau hasn't said there aren't any names back there, and he's not afraid of lying to our faces. Of course there's names in that thing. And it's important. What other country would put up with compromised people at the highest levels of power? Apparently us. What a bloody embarrassment. And then, again, to see the embarrassment of legacy media outright saying that, Elizabeth May is credible. Elizabeth May, the one who said Omar Khadr has more class than the federal cabinet. Yeah, that's a Lizzie May quote. And I'm not going to try and do her version of drunken singing she did at another press event. I mean, whatever. She's elected. She can say whatever she pleases. But come on, if that's the best you've got is to have Elizabeth May say nothing to see here, I think we got to go a little farther. Let's go a little deeper into government stupidity, though. The CRA, this is another beauty. This is where the world of information, you see this government focused on control, focused on misinformation, focused on misdirecting you. from everything, from, their bad tax policies to spies in the government, literal spies. They are paying, or CRA, the Canadian Revenue Agency, everybody's favorite, paid employees up to $1,000 an article. Yeah, they're employees to produce fake news stories published by Canadian newsrooms. Yes, they paid $233,000 to the Blacklock's reporter reported on this. By the way, an independent media, these guys are fantastic. They paid News Canada, which is like a press service. They put stories up, other newspapers pick them up and basically just reheat them, stick them out for lazy content. They don't have reporters on the ground like we do with the Western Standard. But we found out $233,000 was paid to CRA employees to write puff pieces and baloney and stick it in there, and then newspapers picked it up. The Lethbridge Herald was one of them, and a few others. Really, this is where your tax dollars are going. Hundreds of thousands of dollars to have the people who steal your taxes through the CRA, who are overpaid, who don't want to come in more than 2 days a week, to give fake news to you. It's so hard to get real news. It's not surprising people are so bloody cynical, right? I mean, how? How do you get the truth to people out there? But this is what our government is about. And again, they're hiding spies. What do you expect? One of the things I said earlier, I'm just going to throw that out there too. I threw that out on X. If you want to really get scrapping with me or commenting or whatever, my favorite place is X, formerly Twitter. But because right now, what I've been hitting the politicians with all the time, whenever I see a liberal pop up there and say something on Twitter, I respond with, what nation are you beholden to? Because you know what? Until they release the names of who these compromised MPs are, we have to suspect all of them. They're all suspects. Any one of them could be Ed. Any one of those liberals. And I'm going to remind them, you might be a spy because you refuse to tell us who they are. And the only way they can clear their names is to release the bloody list. Open it up. It's ours. It's ours. They forget who they are supposed to serve. They're supposed to serve us. The data should be ours by default, and they have to make the reason why they would not let us know that. And something I kind of floated out there, just saying, because I got a feeling eventually it's going to leak. It's going to leak. Somebody with principles can say, that's enough. I can't take this anymore. We've got spies in our House of Commons. I'm going to leak that list because a lot of members have seen it now. They know who it is. Boy, it must be fun in caucus meetings. They're going to leak it. But, even if a fake document leaked out there and a bunch of MPs or senators were named, just if it happened, how would they be able to clear their name, right? Well, there's only one way to clear the name. Release the list. I don't know. So if somebody who happened to be bored and released that list of names like that, it just would be interesting to see if maybe that prompted the government to open up and tell us who the spies in our government are. People should be marching in the streets over this. Instead, they're busy marching in the streets, as Dave pointed out, or the others, lunatics terrorizing Toronto neighborhoods with impunity, masked, intimidating people. And why? Because the neighborhood's Jewish. That's not a priority for this government. No. They're busy covering up spies, right? Speaking of fake news, let's get on to another big, beautiful part of it. CBC, yes, Mother Corp, the home of Canada's worst broadcast. They're terrible. And of course, they get $1.4 billion a year, your tax dollars, straight towards them to put out that junk. And then on top of that, they take hundreds of millions out of the advertising market while they're at it. And they've been pouring it in to the online world, online news and so on, because that's the way things are morphing. Fair enough. But it's not working. Again, it shows how efficient government corporations are versus private. The Western Standard on a shoestring budget. We've been growing and growing. Yeah, I know I love patting our own backs. I'll do it when I can. Hey, we've screwed up now and then too, and I've talked about that, but I don't want to talk about that right now. Let's talk about CBC screw-ups. Guess how much of the national social and media engagement this $1.4 billion behemoth has managed to buy over the years with all that money? 11%. 11%. The biggest media organization in the country, the one that gets $1.4 billion a year, cannot manage to put out content good enough to capture more than 11% of what's going on. In fact, as far as the news goes, we're still farther down there with the Standard, but the top one right now is CTV, and yeah, they're terrible. They're at 25%. Global, which as I mentioned is probably going to go broke pretty soon by the looks of their shares, is at 12%. Even Rebel Media, I think, is at 7 or 8 or something. But here's your tax dollars at work, right? To get propaganda from the CBC. I didn't mention that when Franco was on, and I should have. We're talking about an area that could have used cuts. One of the areas that we could certainly cut is, as Jordan's pointing out with Tate, yes, the head of CBC, cut the CBC. Instant $1.4 billion a year in savings. We talk about corporate welfare. We talked about subsidies. Sometimes the numbers are too big and your average person just doesn't really wrap their head around what it is. Think about that. $1.4 billion. That's $1,400 million. If you were going to give $1 million grant per year to little media outlets, just think a little media outlet for $1 million a year, you could do pretty good local coverage. You could build quite a good little outfit. We could build 1,400 independent media outlets with a base budget of $1 million a year for what we give the CBC. Even if half of those outlets went broke after a year, which I don't know how they could with $1 million budget like that, you'd still have 700 independent media outlets reporting on things on the ground, doing things, covering the news. For the price that we're giving the CBC, that only 11% is even engaged with. What a waste of money. So speaking of areas to be cut, and again, Pierre Poilievre has promised to defund the CBC. But I'll tell you what, if and when he becomes the prime minister, he's going to have a lot of pressure not to do that. It's going to be tough to follow through with it. This is where we're talking about engagement too, guys. Stay on them. Stay on their case. Get rid of that big, rotten dinosaur, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, because it's ruining media. It's ruining information. It's not accountable to you. It's not accountable to viewers. It's just a big, bloated, pocket-padding government organization that Catherine Tate is terrible, and they've been taking massive bonuses for this junk that nobody's watching. I still don't believe in a subsidized federal media, and I don't believe, by the way, I don't want to see 1,400 subsidized outlets out there. I just want to see taxes cut and get them out of the advertising market so that the other independent media outlets can compete for that advertising. But it would be more comfortable if at least they had a viewership, but they don't even have that. Get rid of this thing. I mean, it ties in with other government things too. The Canada Post is now bleeding hundreds and hundreds of millions every year. It's getting up into the billions. Let's face reality. Guess why? Because there's still home delivery going on in a massive amount of the country. Yes. Why is that happening? Well, because when the super boxes were coming along, efficiency, trying to streamline things, Prime Minister Ding Dong didn't want to get in trouble with the postal union because we have all those mail monkeys out there making a hell of a lot of money to work 4 days a week. Because come on, let's face it, you never really get that mail on Fridays. And said, no, I'll protect those jobs. Don't worry, we'll stop that transition to super boxes and we'll keep home delivery. And even now, nobody's got the nuts to say, let's just do it. Cut. We don't need it. Amazon does a better job of delivering the packages. That's the growth area anyways. We don't need your electric bill coming in the mail anymore. We barely need mail anymore. Move on with it. So, when we're talking about where to cut, because that's one of the responses people come up with when we talk about cutting taxes. There's lots of room to cut, guys. Lots and lots and lots of room to cut. But we got to have those discussions. And those discussions frighten even conservative politicians because they don't want to be the one having the union freak out on them. Well, don't give them the choice, guys. You freak out on them. You get louder in the union. You get on their case. Here's, another one. Environmental benefits. This is going to get, $8 billion, a subsidy program for industries that are supposed to be greening things. $8 billion. And it was asked in committee, the managers of this environmental department, with $8 billion, how much have you reduced reductions? How much impact have you had? They outright just said, we don't know. We don't know. So they've dumped $8 billion of your dollars, the money you're working for while you struggle to pay the bills, into these companies, which we know are a cesspool of patronage, probably corruption like the Arrive scam and other things like that. And they can't even tell you what kind of results there were. Again, if it was a private company, you're putting massive amounts of money in, your shareholders say, let's see the output. What do I get for it? You have to give an answer. Not when it's government, though. No, not when it's government. Speaking of which, and this comes down to the level of provincial governments too, we saw a positive change in a sense with the Canadian Energy Centre, known as the War Room. It was a creation of Jason Kenney. They had $30 million a year to basically speak up. They're supposed to defend the energy industry and things like that. And it really hasn't been very good. They ran into one disaster after another. They sort of lost credibility. And finally, Smith has formally pulled the plug on this thing. and some of it's going to be absorbed into government because it's all turned into as a government comms branch anyways. It was too expensive and inefficient. Look, the role for defending the energy industry should be the energy industry. And here's again, back to the federal government making it illegal or trying to make it illegal for energy companies to defend themselves. 500 companies are displayed on the floor here at the Global Energy Show in Calgary. These are the people to defend this industry. These are the people looking forward. The technology here is amazing. The stuff that's going ahead. As well, the communications. We should get better communications from industry organizations. They should be speaking up, not the government, because the government's incompetent. Unfortunately, when industry gets big enough, it often becomes incompetent too. So that's why we've seen such a limp-wristed approach coming from a lot of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers and other industry associations when they should be speaking up on behalf of this industry a heck of a lot more vehemently. Hopefully there's networking happening at events like this. So this is where the heavyweights are. This is where they're at. There's groups like Michael Binion and the Modern Miracle Network who defend the industry. We need more private. You guys have got to defend yourselves. That's a little bit of what Poilievre said as well when he talked to industry and companies. Said, enough. You guys have got to start telling your shareholders, your people, your employees that you need to be defended, that the government needs to be smaller. It shouldn't always be on them. So hopefully we're seeing that here. We're seeing Suncor speaking up, saying, hey, we're going to be an oil company. I don't care what you think. Yes. You know, you'd think that wouldn't be controversial, an oil company saying it's an oil company, but he got dragged before a parliamentary committee for daring to say so. Absurd. All right. Well, I've rambled it all out, guys. Thank you for joining me on our very first live hit from a remote location like this. It's gone really well. I really appreciate you tuning in. I'm going to be taking in the rest of the displays here. We're coming from the Global Energy Show. It used to be the Petroleum Show. Now they call it Energy. So make sure if you haven't subscribed, westernstandard.news/subscription, guys. We really appreciate it if you have already. And if you haven't, spread the word. Nag other people. Get them on for us. We can beat the control of the information. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you all again next week. I'll be coming from the regular studio again. See you then.